You ever have one of those moments where you look back and think, that was the point where we should have turned around? I think about that a lot now. Omar, Ryan, and I were supposed to have a once-in-a-lifetime trip. One final adventure before Omar got married and settled down. No wild bachelor parties, no drunken chaos in some city nightclub. Omar wanted something different. A real experience. So we wrote down a bunch of dream destinations, tossed them into a hat, and let fate decide. Banff, Canada. None of us had ever been to Canada before, let alone the rugged wilderness of the Rockies. It was the perfect mix of adventure and relaxation. Hiking, breathtaking views, fresh air, and most importantly, no distractions. Just us and nature. I can't even remember now if it was Omar or Ryan who pulled that piece of paper out of the hat, but I do remember the feeling that settled in my gut as soon as we arrived. The initial excitement was there, of course, but something else polluted that joyous feeling. Like an oil slick on a beautiful shoreline. Like we weren't supposed to be there. At first, I chalked it up to the eerie quiet of the place. Banff is stunning, no doubt. Snow-capped mountains, crystal-clear lakes, forests stretching as far as the eye can see. But there was something about it. Something not quite right. I know how that sounds. Like I'm trying to spook you before I even get to the good part. But I need you to understand I'm not writing this for entertainment. I'm writing this because I need someone else to know what happened to us. Because something out there in the mountains was watching us. And I don't think we were ever meant to leave. If you had told me back then that this trip would be the scariest experience in my life, I would have laughed. The truth is, for the first few days, Banff felt like something out of a dream. Our flight landed in Calgary in the late afternoon, the sky a soft, endless blue stretching over miles of open prairie. It took us no time at all to grab the rental car, a rugged SUV that Omar insisted on for the authentic mountain experience, and hit the road. The drive started off flat and golden. The kind of landscape that makes you feel like you're on the edge of something much bigger. Every now and then, we'd pass clusters of horses grazing in the fields, their coats shimmering in the last light of the day. At one point, we slowed down to take in an odd sight. A lone coyote lounging near a herd of horses, as if it belonged there. It wasn't hunting, it wasn't lurking. It was just there, resting in the grass as the horses grazed around it, completely unbothered. "Never seen that before," Ryan muttered, eyes fixed on the scene. "Maybe he thinks he's a horse," Omar joked. We kept driving, and soon the mountains began to rise in the distance, a jagged wall of stone that seemed to swallow the sky. The closer we got, the more everything changed. The air, the colors, even the way the light hit the landscape. The golden fields gave way to dense forests, rivers twisting through valleys, the world becoming wilder every mile. Then, just as we rounded a bend, we saw them. A small herd of elk, standing right in the middle of the road. Ryan braked hard, and we all jolted forward in our seats. But the elk, they didn't even flinch. "Guess we're not in a rush anymore," I said, watching as one of the bulls turned its massive head towards us. We waited. 5 minutes, 10. They didn't move, just stood there, their breath visible in the cool air, their ears flicking at unseen sounds in the trees. It wasn't just their size that struck me, it was the stillness of them. The way they belonged to this place in a way we never could. "This is insane," Omar whispered. "It feels alive here," Ryan added. "Like everything's watching us." I nodded, remembering a different trip we had taken a few years back. Scotland, where we'd driven for hours through misty rolling hills expecting to see something majestic and only ever finding sheep. Just sheep. Miles and miles of them. "This is way better than Scotland," I said, snapping a photo. Ryan laughed. "Everything's better than Scotland, mate." Eventually the elk moved on, vanishing into the trees as silently as they'd appeared. We started driving again, deeper into the mountains, watching as the last light of the sun bled into the horizon. The road stretched ahead of us, winding deeper into the mountains. The sky had darkened into that perfect shade of deep blue just before night fully settles in, and the forest around us felt endless. It had been maybe 20 minutes since the elk had finally moved on, and we were still buzzing from the encounter. "Imagine living here," Omar said, leaning forward in his seat. "Like waking up every morning and this is just normal." Ryan scoffed. "I'd get nothing done. I'd just be staring out my window all day." I grinned, about to add something when Ryan suddenly hit the brakes. Another roadblock. Only this one wasn't caused by animals. A Parks Canada ranger stood in the middle of the road, illuminated by the red flashes of his truck. Several other vehicles were pulled off to the side, some with their hazard lights blinking. Whatever was happening, we couldn't see it. The ranger's truck and the parked cars ahead were blocking our view. Ryan slowed to a stop, frowning. "What the hell is this?" The ranger, a tall guy with a thick jacket and a Parks Canada cap, raised a gloved hand and waved us down. His expression was calm, but there was something in his posture. Firm, deliberate. Ryan rolled down the window as the ranger stepped up. "Hey folks," the ranger said, his voice steady. "Just a quick delay, stay in your vehicle for now." "What's going on?" Omar asked. The ranger hesitated, glancing briefly towards whatever was ahead. "Just some wildlife activity." He gave us a polite but unreadable nod, and then, without another word, turned and climbed back into his truck. Ryan sighed, shifting in his seat. "Alright, that was vague as hell." We sat there, watching and waiting. A few of the other cars had people inside recording with their phones. Some even had cameras with long lenses poking out of their windows. "Okay, now I want to know what's going on," I muttered. Ryan reached for the door handle. "I'll just ask." Before he could even crack the door open, the ranger's truck lights flashed, and from inside he gave a quick but unmistakable "stay in your car" gesture. Ryan exhaled, letting go of the handle. "Guess that answers that." We looked at each other, then back at the other parked cars. The people filming weren't looking at the ranger or even at the roadblock itself. Their cameras were pointed towards the tree line. Something was in the woods, and whatever it was worth recording. The tension in the car thickened as we tried to see what everyone else was recording. The ranger sat still in his truck, watching the trees, his hand resting near his radio. Then the forest shifted. A low rustling, the sound of something big moving through the brush. And then he appeared. A gigantic grizzly bear lumbered out of the trees, his sheer size making every single one of us go silent. He was a beast, easily over 600 pounds, with thick fur that rippled over powerful muscle as he moved. His face was scarred, his shoulders broad, and when he turned his head slightly toward us, I felt my breath catching in my throat. No wonder the ranger wanted us to stay inside. The bear barely acknowledged the line of vehicles as he plodded forward, staying a safe distance away. Then, with an almost lazy motion, he rose onto his hind legs. Now, I've seen bears in zoos before, but this was different. Standing like that, he was taller than the SUV, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Even the people filming him had gone dead silent. It was like being in the presence of something ancient, something that owned this land in a way we never could. And I knew who he was. "Holy crap," I whispered. "That's the boss." Ryan and Omar glanced at me. "What?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a breath. "The boss, he's famous. I saw him in a bunch of Banff videos online. He's the biggest grizzly bear in the park. They think he's like 20 years old." Omar stared at the bear, who was still sniffing the air, his massive claws hanging in front of his chest. "He's huge." "Yeah," I nodded. "And get this, he survived being hit by a train twice." "No way," Ryan muttered. "Swear to God," I said. "And he's still kicking ass. He's fathered a bunch of cubs, he steals kills from wolves, and he's even eaten other bears." "Jesus," Omar whispered. "What a legend." The boss slowly dropped back down onto all fours with a heavy thud and continued his way across the road, his hulking frame moving with surprising ease. The ranger still hadn't moved, just watching, waiting. No one spoke. No one dared to move. And then, just as effortlessly as he had arrived, the boss disappeared into the trees on the other side of the road. For a long moment, we all just sat there, processing what we had just seen. Then the ranger's radio crackled, breaking the silence. A moment later, he opened his door, stepped out, and waved us forward. Ryan let out a breath. "Well," he said, gripping the wheel, "Banff's already way better than Scotland." None of us disagreed. As we drove past, the three of us were still buzzing from what we had just seen. I mean, how many people could say they saw the boss up close like that? The whole thing felt unreal. But as the road cleared and Ryan eased the SUV forward, a new thought crept into mind. "What was he doing in the road for that long?" I muttered. Omar shrugged. "Just vibing?" Ryan nodded. "When you're that big, I guess you can do whatever the hell you want." We chuckled, but something about it felt off. A bear like that, a top predator, didn't just hang around like that unless there was a reason. And then we saw it. At the edge of the tree line, right next to the road, just a few feet, were the remains of a much smaller black bear, half eaten. The laughter in the car died instantly. No one said a word. We just stared as we slowly rolled past, the shape of the carcass unmistakable even in the fading light. Ribs exposed, fur matted with blood, torn flesh. Ryan reached over and silently locked the button on the doors. Click. Omar did the same on his side. Click. I followed suit. Click. No one acknowledged it. We just kept driving, eyes forward, pretending we had seen nothing. Only once we had put a solid few miles between us and that scene did Omar finally clear his throat. "So, anyone else feel like that was some mafia shit?" I exhaled. "Yep." Ryan nodded. "I don't think I ever want to meet a bear that eats other bears." By the time we finally rolled into Banff, the sky had darkened into a deep navy blue, the last hints of sunlight fading behind the jagged peaks. The town itself was like something out of a postcard. Cozy wooden buildings, warm lights glowing from shop windows, and the towering mountains standing like silent guardians in the distance. After checking into our hotel, a rustic little lodge with wood-paneled walls and thick wool blankets, we wasted no time heading out to explore. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant campfires. Everything about Banff felt alive, like the land itself had a pulse. We wandered down Banff Avenue, popping in and out of souvenir shops, grabbing small gifts for family and friends back home. Ryan bought his girlfriend a cute little carved bear figure. Omar picked up a ridiculously overpriced hoodie that he swore was worth every penny. And I grabbed a few postcards, already planning to write something obnoxiously sentimental on them. The locals were just as warm as the town itself. Bartenders, shopkeepers, even random people on the street were happy to chat, throwing out recommendations left and right. "If you want a real challenge," a young guy at an outdoor gear shop told us, "try scrambling up Mount Rundle." "Go canoeing at Vermilion Lake at sunrise," suggested a woman at a cafe. "That's when the water is perfect." But it was an older French-Canadian man, sitting outside a small pub with a pint of beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, who really caught our attention. "You boys look like the adventurous type," he said, his accent thick but smooth. "If you want to camp somewhere really special, forget the tourist spots. Go to Elephant's Peak." Omar, already buzzing with excitement about this trip, leaned in. "Never heard of it. What's up there?" The man smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. "Nothing but stars and silence. No crowds, just you and the mountains." Ryan looked skeptical. "Isn't it kind of off the beaten path?" The man waved a hand dismissively. "Not too bad. A bit of a hike, but worth it. If you need a tent, I have an extra." We exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of experience we were looking for. Something real. Something raw. Omar grinned. "I'm in." I hesitated for half a second, but the excitement was contagious. "All right, let's do it." Ryan exhaled. "Fine, but if we die, I'm haunting you both." The old man chuckled. "Bon courage, mes amis." We clinked our beers together, already imagining the adventure ahead. At that moment, Banff still felt magical. We had no idea what was waiting for us in the mountains. The next morning, we wasted no time getting ready for our camping trip. After a solid breakfast at a local diner, we hit the outdoor supply shops, picking up food, extra layers, and a canister of bear spray for good measure. The old French guy who had suggested Elephant's Peak met us outside our hotel, true to his word, and handed over his spare tent with a knowing smile. "Be careful up there," he said as we loaded our gear into the SUV. "We will," Omar promised, practically bouncing with excitement. By noon, we had everything prepared for the following day. With a few hours to kill, we decided to split up and explore Banff on our own. Omar wanted to check out the hot springs. Ryan went off in search of a local brewery, and I, ever the wildlife nerd, made my way to the Banff Park Museum. The place was small but packed with history, its walls lined with glass cases of taxidermy animals. Grizzlies, bison, wolves, wolverines, an entire frozen snapshot of the wild, preserved up close. I wandered the aisles, taking my time, stopping in front of a lynx display. The thing was beautiful, its fur thick, its massive paws built for silent movement in the deep snow. "Rare to see one in the wild," came a voice beside me. I turned to see a Parks Canada ranger standing nearby. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with long, graying black hair tied back and a uniform that looked well worn. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I read they avoid people." He gave a small smile. "Smart animals. They know what places to stay away from." I wasn't sure why, but something about the way he said it made me pause. We started chatting, and I quickly realized he was native, likely from one of the First Nations in the area. He had a quiet, steady way of speaking, like someone who had spent a lifetime observing the land rather than talking about it. We talked about lynx, their hunting patterns, their near invisibility in the snow. It was a good conversation, until I mentioned Elephant's Peak. The moment the words left my mouth, his expression shifted. Not dramatic, just off. His polite interest faded, his posture stiffened slightly, and for the first time we started talking, he broke eye contact. "Where did you say you were going?" he asked. "Elephant's Peak," I repeated, suddenly feeling unsure. We're camping there tomorrow." He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the links display, but he wasn't looking at it. His jaw tightened, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was lower, quieter. "Bad idea." That was it. No explanation, just 2 words. I blinked. Why? His eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time there was something heavy in them. A weight I couldn't place. "Dangerous wildlife," he said simply. That should have been a normal response. Banff was full of predators, bears, wolves, cougars, but something about the way he said it sent a chill up my spine. I swallowed. What kind of wildlife? He didn't answer right away. Then, just as I was about to ask again, he gave a tight nod and said, "Have a safe trip." And just like that, the conversation was over. I watched as he turned and walked toward the museum entrance, disappearing through a side door. Something about the whole exchange left me uneasy. I told myself he was just being cautious. Maybe he had to deal with one too many clueless tourists who thought they could waltz into the backcountry without knowing the risks. But as I stood there, staring at the link's frozen, glassy gaze, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something. Something he didn't want to say out loud. I didn't mention the conversation with the ranger to Ryan or Omar. Maybe I should have. But at the time I chalked it up to nothing more than an old-timer being overly cautious. After all, if Eliphas Peak was really dangerous, surely more people would have warned us, right? So I shook it off. The next morning we packed up our gear, stuffed the borrowed tent into the SUV, and headed out. The first stretch of the trip was smooth, with paved roads winding through towering evergreens, the air crisp and fresh. The whole morning had a golden glow to it, the sunlight bouncing off the peaks, making everything look too perfect. We were about 20 minutes outside of Banff when we saw it. At first it was just a blur of motion at the side of the road, something dark, fast. Then, as we got closer, we realized what we were looking at. A black wolf. It was massive, larger than I thought wolves could get, its jet black fur sleek and rippling with muscle. But what really made us go silent was what was trapped in its jaws. A full-grown bighorn ram. The wolf had it by the throat, the ram's body going limp, eyes wide with the glassy stillness of death. Ryan slowed the SUV to a crawl as we passed, all 3 of us watching in stunned silence. The wolf barely acknowledged us, its yellow eyes flicking up for a half-second before it turned and disappeared into the trees, dragging the ram's body with it like it weighed nothing. Omar let out a long breath. "Jesus, that was huge!" Ryan exhaled sharply, gripping the wheel. "Did you see how easily it carried that thing? Rams weigh like, what, 200 pounds? "At least," I muttered. For a moment, none of us spoke. The image of that wolf, the way it looked at us, like it knew something, stuck in my mind. Then Omar clapped his hands together. "Alright, let's move on before it decides we look tasty." Ryan shook his head, chuckling. Yeah, back into the wilderness we go." And just like that, we put the black wolf behind us. The rest of the drive was uneventful. The roads gradually got rougher, shifting from pavement to gravel, then to dirt, as we climbed higher into the mountains. The tree line grew thinner, and by the time we reached the base of Eliphas Peak, the world felt different. Quieter. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The other kind. I told myself it was just the isolation, but deep down I knew it was something else. By the time we reached the clearing near the base of Eliphas Peak, the sun was starting to dip behind the mountains. The campsite was nothing special, just a relatively flat patch of land tucked between clusters of tall pines, with a small fire pit made of scattered stones from past campers. No official signs, no marked trails, just raw wilderness. We set up without issue, pitching the old French guy's tent and rolling out our sleeping bags. Omar, ever the self-proclaimed survival expert, took charge of gathering firewood whilst Ryan and I unpacked our food. By the time the fire was crackling, we were all in good spirits, sitting around with beers in hand and talking about everything and nothing. It felt good. The crisp mountain air, the occasional breeze rustling through the trees. It was exactly the kind of trip Omar had envisioned. No loud bars, no overpriced clubs, just us, halfway across the world, soaking in nature. Then, as we sat in the comfortable silence, staring into the flames, we heard something. At first, I couldn't even process what I was hearing. It started like an elk bugle, that high-pitched, eerie whistle sound that echoed across the valley. But then, halfway through, it shifted. The tone cracked, warped, turning into something that sounded more like a coyote's howl, and then a man's scream. Not a distant, vague cry, not like the sound you'd kind of write off as imagination, but there was definitely an element of human, and it was filled with pain. The three of us snapped our heads up at the same time. No one moved, no one spoke. We just listened as the sound stretched out, bouncing off of the surrounding cliffs. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from. Could have been miles away. Could have been closer. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. We sat frozen, waiting, half expecting to hear it again. Nothing. Omar was the first to break the silence. "The hell was that?" Ryan shook his head, his face pale in the firelight. "An elk, maybe?" I swallowed. Elk don't sound like that. We stared at each other for a long time. The fire popped. The trees swayed. Eventually, Omar forced a chuckle. "Probably just an animal that got spooked or something. It's the wild, man. Weird sounds happen." Ryan exhaled and nodded. Yeah, true. I wanted to agree. I really did. But something about the way the sound changed from an animal's call to something so unmistakably human had left a pit in my stomach. We stayed up a little longer, half joking, half jittery, before eventually crawling into the tent. I told myself it was nothing, but as I lay there in the dark, staring into the nylon ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there had seen us first. And that sound, it wasn't just an animal. It was a warning. The night descended slowly, the air cooling quietly as the sun sank behind the jagged peaks. The three of us huddled inside the borrowed tent, laughing off the strange noise we heard earlier. We convinced ourselves it had been some combination of elk and coyote. Nature was unpredictable. We were just guests in its realm. All right. Omar grinned as he lay down in the middle of the tent. "No more talk of weird animals, okay? Let's just enjoy the damn trip." Ryan, already half zoned out, let out a sleepy grunt of agreement. I, on the other hand, couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. But it was late, and fatigue had started to take hold. I rolled over in my sleeping bag, trying to push the uneasy thoughts aside. The fire had burned down to embers, and the world outside seemed still. Before I knew it, we were all asleep. The rhythmic sound of the wind rustling the trees and the soft crackle of a distant creek played in the background, lulling us into a false sense of security. But then, snuffling. It started quietly, like a wet, sniffing sound coming from just outside our tent. I froze, my heart skipping a beat, the kind of primal fear that takes over when you know you're not alone. The snuffing sound continued, and something was pushing its nose against the fabric, sniffing us out. It sounded close. Too close. My mind screamed bear. Ryan stirred beside me. What the hell? I didn't answer. I was already reaching for the bear spray. The snuffling grew louder. It sounded like it was circling us, moving around the tent, testing the boundaries of the small space we'd forced ourselves into. The deep, rasping breath of something big. Something dangerous. My fingers found the canister of bear spray, the metal cold in my hands. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, my breath shallow and quick. I clicked the safety off, the sound sharp in the quiet night. Click. The snuffling stopped. For a moment there was nothing but the sound of our breathing, the quiet hum of the wind through the trees. The air felt too thick, too still. My grip tightened around the bear spray. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, my pulse racing in time with my thoughts. Don't move, I whispered. No one moved. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Then, in the distance, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the valley. A flash of lightning lit up the sky, briefly illuminating the exterior of the tent in a stark white light. For just a moment, I saw the dark silhouette of something moving outside. Great, I thought, my grip tightening on the bear spray. Now a storm's coming too. The wind picked up, but wasn't enough to drown out the sounds of the shifting outside. The rustle of fabric, the soft scraping of something long and thin dragging against the ground. Every movement outside was deliberate, slow, as if whatever was out there was testing the air, figuring out how to approach us. Another flash of lightning split the sky, and in that brief instant, I saw it. Not a bear, not a wolf, not a coyote. I froze, my stomach twisting in a way I can't even believe. It was a humanoid shape, tall and thin, far too thin. The silhouette was barely discernible at first, but the lightning illuminated it just enough to make my blood run cold. The figure was in the process of standing up, its body unnaturally elongated as if it had been crouching low to the ground just moments before. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but when the flash of lightning struck again, it revealed more. Long arms, disproportionately long, almost like it had been stretched, a grotesque parody of a human figure. The arms hung too low, swaying with the wind in unnatural ways, each one twitching slightly as if the creature was adjusting its posture. And the head, thin, too thin, with long tendrils of hair swaying slightly in the breeze. It almost looked like they were moving independently, separately from the head itself, curling like something alive. I could feel my heart in my throat. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It was like I was staring at something that shouldn't exist, a creature pulled from some fever dream. Ryan's breath hitched beside me. Omar shifted, but I could hear his breathing quicken too. None of us said anything. We couldn't. Our mouths were dry, our eyes locked on the figure outside, frozen in place. I couldn't tell how much time passed. My thoughts were scattered, my mind struggling to process what I'd just seen. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't something that belonged in the wilds of Banff. Not something that should have been anywhere near our campsite. We lay there as still as we could manage, hoping, praying that whatever the creature was would stay out there in the shadows. But deep down, we all knew it wasn't done with us. The thunder cracked above us, louder than ever, as if the sky itself was splitting apart. But the storm wasn't what made my heart hammer in my chest. It was what came next. The roar. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't anything remotely natural. It was something far worse. A chimeric wail, part animal, part something unrecognizably other. It tore through the night, joining the cacophony of thunder and wind. My body went cold, paralyzed in a state of pure terror. I could feel the vibration of sounds in my bones, a deep, raw rage that sent shockwaves through the air. And then, almost as if the creature's roar had activated something deep within me, I acted without thinking. Before I even realized what I was doing, I had unzipped the tent flap. I could hear Omar shouting something, but his voice was drowned out by the overwhelming roar. I didn't care. I didn't even stop to think, my fingers trembling as I fumbled for the nozzle. I aimed it at the spot just beyond the tent, where the creature had crouched earlier. I squeezed. The spray hissed in the air, and for a moment I felt like I was moving in slow motion. The thick mist of bear mace shot right into the night, spraying directly into the eyes of the creature. There was a horrible sound, a guttural, agonizing wail that pierced through the roar of the thunder. The creature recoiled, its long arms flailing as it stumbled backwards. It shrieked, its hands clutching at its eyes, as if the very air was burning its flesh. The sound was deafening. The sheer pain in that wail, a wail that should never have come from anything living, sent chills through my spine. My brain was screaming, but my body was moving before I could catch up. I heard Ryan yell, "Go, go, go!" and the sound of him scrambling, running toward the car. Omar was already on his feet, pulling me with him as we dashed to the SUV, hearts pounding in our chests. Everything felt like a blur. The tent was left behind, the cold, wet air hitting my face as I bolted towards the car. My mind couldn't process what we were seeing. The scene unfolding before us was too much, too impossible to understand. As we neared the vehicle, I dared a glance back, my mind trying desperately to force some sense of reality into the nightmare we were witnessing. The creature was still there, writhing in pain. Its long, gangly form was twisting, thrashing, but it was clear that the mace had caused it unimaginable distress. It barely resembled anything human anymore, its proportions even more distorted in the chaos of its agony. But even through the haze of panic, we saw something that made our stomachs drop further. There were more. In the darkness just at the edge of our vision, other shapes were moving, barely perceptible but unmistakably there. The long, thin silhouettes of more of those creatures, dozens of them, twitching, swaying, almost like they were emerging from the shadows themselves. But my mind couldn't register it. I couldn't. Ryan yanked open the SUV's door, and we all scrambled in, my heart a racing blur of panic. As I slammed the door shut, I could see the creature from the tent now stumbling away, clutching its burning face. It turned, stumbling into the darkness, its form disappearing into the trees. The engine roared to life, and Ryan slammed the pedal down. I don't remember much because of the crash. The world spun like a chaotic blur of glass and metal, the screams of my friends barely audible over the deafening roar of the creature's screech. It was a sound that seemed to reverberate in my chest, rattling my bones, and I knew we weren't going to make it. The thing had charged out of the woods, straight at us, too fast for any of us to react in time. It came out of nowhere, like a phantom from a nightmare, and I could only watch in frozen horror as it covered the distance between us in an instant. It was monstrous, the headlights illuminating it just long enough for us to make out its full form. A rail-thin humanoid creature, its long arms reaching out toward the car, its face twisted in a grotesque snarl. It was impossibly tall, its body unnaturally elongated with thin tendrils of hair swaying in the wind like reeds of a swamp. Its eyes seemed to glow, predatory, locked onto us in the car as it surged toward us, and all I could think was, we're going to die. Ryan screamed, his hands yanking the steering wheel as he tried to swerve, but the thing wasn't having it. With a roar that shook the car, it slammed into the side of our vehicle, a collision that felt like the earth itself had buckled beneath us. The metal of the car groaned under its weight, and in a single violent motion, it tossed us off of the road. The car spun uncontrollably, tumbling through the air as trees and rocks blurred past the windows. It was as if time had slowed. I remember seeing Ryan's face, panicked, his hand gripping the wheel as he tried to correct the car, but it was too late. The world flipped upside down, and I could taste the cold air as we plummeted toward it. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the thing, the creature, standing there, watching, waiting as our car rolled and crashed into a tree with a sickening thud. Then darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed days later. The light was harsh and white above me, making everything feel distant, like I was still floating in some kind of dream. My body was sore, every muscle aching from the crash, and I could barely make sense of where I was. My hand shook as I reached up to touch my face, feeling the cuts and bruises that had formed from the impact. I was alive, but barely. Ryan was sitting next to the bed, his eyes tired but relieved when he saw I was awake. "Josh," he said, his voice hoarse. "You're awake. Good to see you, man." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, like I hadn't drunk anything in hours. I croaked. "What happened? Where's Omar?" Ryan sighed, looking down for a moment, before meeting my eyes. "He's fine. Both of us are fine. But you took the worst of it. The crash, it was bad. We barely got out of there in time." I swallowed, piecing together fragments of the events that had led up to this point. "The creature. What happened to it?" Ryan hesitated, his gaze faltered. Then he finally spoke. "It didn't get us, but it almost did. Almost." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean almost? It hit us. It almost killed us." Ryan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face, as if he was still processing everything. "After the crash, we couldn't get the car started. But we could still hear that thing, Josh. It was out there in the woods screeching. That noise was. I don't know. It wouldn't stop. But then, out of nowhere, this guy, remember the fella from the museum? He said he met you there. He showed up, came out to the woods with his family." I blinked. "Wait, what? The guy from the museum, he came for us?" Ryan nodded, his voice low. "Yeah, he came with a few people. I didn't know how he found us so fast, but they did. And they helped us. More importantly, they helped us get rid of it and the rest of those things." "Get rid of it? How?" Ryan exhaled, eyes narrowing. "They fought them. I didn't know how they did it, but they had some kind of ritual, I suppose. The guy spoke in a language I didn't understand, and when the creature screamed again, they just stopped, backed off, disappeared into the woods." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "They just left?" "Aye, just like that. It was like the guy knew exactly how to make it go away. After that, they made sure we were okay and stayed with us until help arrived. I stared at him in disbelief, trying to make sense of it all. Ultimately, I just lay back down and chose to just be thankful to be alive. The rest of our trip was a blur. We tried to carry on like everything was fine, but the unease never left us. Every night we half expected that creature to come back, but nothing ever did. We made it through the rest of our time in Banff, sightseeing, but it felt like we were walking in the shadow of something we couldn't fully comprehend. Then, 2 weeks later, we were on our way out of Banff. The drive was quiet, and I tried not to look back. But as we approached the edge of town, I saw him. The Frenchman. He was standing at the edge of the town, staring at us as we drove past. His expression was hard to read, but I could see it. He wasn't just looking at us. He was watching. And the frustration on his face was unmistakable. I don't know why, but the sight of him made my stomach turn. I glanced at Ryan and Omar, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy chatting, completely oblivious. I didn't look back after that. I didn't need to. Something told me we'd never fully understand what had happened in those mountains. That creature, the warnings, the Frenchman's strange look. All of it was part of something larger, something we weren't meant to understand. But as we drove out of Banff, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of it. That whatever had been watching us, whatever had been waiting, whatever was out there still. And I couldn't help but wonder, what else could be out there in the world? Good evening, guys. I just wanted to stop by and say thank you for the support, but I also wanted to remind you guys that we have t-shirts and other designs available on Bonfire. If you want to support me, this is one of the best places you can go to, though I do also have a Patreon. If you're like me and love the great outdoors and want to protect it, one of our t-shirt designs, Bring Back the Wolf, helps the Rewilding Institute, which helps protect and bring back damaged ecosystems and species across the world. Also, if you want to hear more from me narrating horror stories, please feel free to check out my first ever audible book narration, Primitive War Dispatches: The Hunting of Stalker Force, the link of which will be in the description and comments below.